This afternoon, a delegation from Israel taking part in ceasefire talks with Hamas leaders in Qatar. Over the weekend, the Israeli cabinet agreed on the framework of a potential prisoner swap, 10 jailed Palestinians in exchange for each hostage being held by Hamas. These talks also come on the same day the prime minister and government of the Palestinian Authority submitted their resignations. The talks are expected to continue in Qatar today, the Israelis insisting they have every intention of carrying on with their invasion of Rafah. The only question is, will a hostage deal push back the timeline or not? The Prime Minister's office saying today that the IDF has presented them with a plan to evacuate civilian populations ahead of the operation. Israel, though, emphasizing they will not pull out of Gaza until Hamas is destroyed. Robert Sherman is on the ground in Tel Aviv. We're going to get to him in just a moment. But first, I'd like to bring in Brigadier General Teichert to talk with us about that. First of all, what stood out to you most? There is some new footage I'd like to go to because this calls for a ceasefire, General. But the IDF is releasing this new video. It shows elite commandos using grenades and drones in a fight against Hamas terrorists. If we can take a look at that, this attack netting a Hamas weapon stash, which includes rifles, ammo, explosives. And this area is also the site of several Hamas tunnels where Israeli hostages had previously been held. Now, according to the IDF, roughly 12,000 Hamas militants have been killed since the start of the war. So let's bring in retired Brigadier General John Teichert. General, I know you had a chance to see this footage. What stood out to you most about it?
Nichole, it's important to remember that this type of footage is actually part of operations that have been going on for the last 4.5 months. This is a very highly trained force within the IDF, that this is a challenging environment, dense urban populations, and they are only achieving success block by block or house by house because of their very high level of training. But it is far from glamorous. It is gut-wrenching and challenging and high risk every time they take the fight to the enemy in Hamas.
You know, and this was compared in a way to a video game, Call of Duty, because of the precise way in which they were able to use a drone to locate where these fighters were hiding and then throw a grenade through a window to ultimately take out those fighters. Is that really the way war is moving just in general?
Only amongst the most highly trained warfighting populations do you see that type of precision. But it's important to remember, Nichole, that the adversary or the enemy always gets a vote. And so while it may look easy while playing a video game, when your heart is pumping and the challenges are fraught with danger at every turn, that being able to execute as precisely as you saw in that video is extremely difficult and only possible because of very high levels of training.
You know, in general, so we talked about this at the top of this, the Palestinian prime minister submitting the resignation of his entire government today. That is a big deal. What do you think this could mean as the war proceeds?
Ultimately, Nichole, it is clear that as Israel continues to take the fight to Hamas and try to secure the release of the hostages, that they are starting to think about long-term security and stability. And a part of that mix is the Palestinian Authority, or likely the part of that mix. And the only way that Israel can have levels of assurance that the Palestinian Authority can take on that role is if they've got the proper leadership. And thus far, the Palestinians and the Arab neighbors of Israel don't believe that the Palestinian Authority under previous leadership was capable of such a thing in Gaza.
You know, and we talked about the fact that there are these talks for a potential ceasefire, possibly 6 weeks. We know Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in the meantime, has been presented with a Gaza civilian evacuation plan. That's an important part of all of this. What do you think would be key for that plan to actually work?
Nichole, from the very beginning, 2 of the 3 primary objectives have been to eliminate the threat of Hamas and secure the release of the hostages. The third is deterring other actors in the region. But there is a balancing act there between letting up on Hamas to release hostages while not giving them sanctuary either to regroup or to present a long-term challenge to Israel. And that is a balance that Israel has to believe is in their best interest in whatever deal ultimately goes forward.
And my last question for you, General, Human Rights Watch right now is accusing Israel of blocking aid to civilians, which ties into that civilian evacuation plan. Do you think enough attention is being paid to the humanitarian crisis as the war itself, rages on?
Nichole, unfortunately, the Palestinians have been put at risk by Hamas. They have lived in squalor since 2007 when Hamas took control in Gaza. That all of this has been precipitated by the terrorist attack on the 7th of October. And unfortunately, Hamas uses as a tactic and a strategy human shields amongst the Palestinians. The Israelis have been placed in an untenable situation. They care more about the Palestinians than Hamas does. And I firmly believe that they're doing everything they can to achieve their objectives while keeping in mind the humanitarian needs of the Palestinians in Gaza.
Yeah, and that humanitarian crisis, though, certainly continues to grow exponentially.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.